next day. A man named Elliot Marnie hadn't shown up for his job at a bank. Fearing the worst with the rumors already spreading around town, a coworker had driven out to his house in the countryside outside of Odella. They found the front window shattered and Marnie dead inside his living room. After a brief scan of the squad room, Mike headed outside to find Maria sitting on the curb by the parking lot. He found her there a lot when something was bothering her. She liked watching the clouds or the cars go by or something. As they drove across Odella, Mike knew something was really off with Maria. Her normally chipper attitude was nowhere to be seen. Instead of talking, she was just staring out the window of the car, quietly watching the streets. They were a lot emptier than they should have been at that time of day. Things were bad in town, but it wasn't like her to brood for long. She was relentlessly positive, even in the darkest hours.
All right, Ravella. What's wrong? And don't tell me it's this case we're on. I've seen you barrel through worse.
She looked at him with forlorn eyes for a moment before replying.
It's Jimmy Rivers, Mike. They finished up checking out everything. His car, his house, his shithole of a hideout. There's nothing to link him to Hawthorne. You know what that means.
Yeah. It means there's nothing left we can do. There's nothing left to link Hawthorne to our jurisdiction.
Damn it, Mike!
She yelled, slamming a fist on the console.
I actually thought we could be the ones to get him. Then the witnesses disappear, the evidence gets tainted, and Myers bites it in a river.
She stayed silent for a moment.
I really thought it'd be us. Imagine it, Mike. Small-down detectives take down crime lord.
Yeah, that would have been great. National headlines, medals, fame and fortune, all that jazz.
Yeah,
Said Ravella, giving him a look and a smirk.
all that.
Her normal demeanor was starting to come back.
We'll get another shot, Ravella. But for now, we've got a body to get to.
Barrow expected the worst as he and Ravella entered the banker's residence, but it was worse than he could have imagined. The sun, shining through the humid air, cast a wavering light over the scene. The body was under a sheet in the dead center of the room, and the floor around it was stained with a massive quantity of blood.
The other ones were weird. This one's worse.
Said Stevens, the department's lead investigator.
Ever hear of death by 1,000 cuts?
He pulled open the sheet on the body, and the veteran detectives both took a step back in shock. The man's face, chest, and abdomen had been impaled by dozens of razor-sharp shards of glass.
Are those from...
Yeah, the window. Only explanation whatsoever is that a massive gust of wind hit the window when he was standing in front of it and blew it all right out.
The man checked to make sure no one was listening, leaned closer to the detectives, and whispered.
My guys are all freaked out after the last few days. If someone somehow is doing this, we need to stop it. Information is getting out and the town is starting to get afraid. Really afraid.
We're trying, okay? So what's going on over there?
He pointed to the floor opposite Marning's body. The investigators were photographing a multitude of pages blown over the floor.
That part's almost as weird, if you can imagine that.
Try me.
This guy was president down at the bank, right? There's all these documents that, as far as we can tell, prove the guy was robbing the bank blind.
He directed their attention to a relatively clean page.
We need an accountant to verify it, but we think he was giving out bad loans to himself. A lot of them. If you had money in that bank, I suggest you get it out while you still can.
Barrow was about to turn his attention back to Stevens when he noticed a long list of names sticking out from under the couch. He saw the name R. Harris at the bottom of the list.
What the hell was he doing with all this evidence sitting out in his living room?
If you ask me, I think he was about to turn himself in. The coworker that called this in was ranting about him acting crazy all day yesterday. She says it was like he was looking over his shoulder.
You think someone had him figured out? And he wanted to turn himself in before they could?
Only thing that makes sense to me.
Barrow turned back to take another look at the scene when his phone rang. He froze in place and, for a moment, considered just letting it ring. Instead, he took a deep breath and answered. It was the dispatcher from back at the station. He braced himself for bad news.
Some guy named Arthur McCann just called in with a report of an intruder.
Great. Where?
I'll get you the address and you can talk to him yourself.
Great.
After writing down the street number, Barrow headed back over to where Ravello was speaking with the crime scene investigator.
Maria, I've got a report that might be something across town.
I still got a few more things to do here, though.
That's fine. I'll head over myself.
Okay, I'll hitch a ride back to the station after I'm done here.
Yeah, that'll work. And Ravel, be careful. I have no idea what's going on.
Barrow headed out towards McCann's house on the edge of town. He didn't know the guy, but most people in town knew the house. It was a huge, old Victorian that hadn't changed for decades. Its owner was only seen periodically and for short periods of time. Kids told each other the old guy had bodies buried in the basement. The detective, normally an overly cautious driver, sped through the streets of Odella. The first thing he noticed when he arrived at the old man's house was the immaculate state of the place. Even after the vicious weather of the past week, the lawn was exactly level and free of debris. The hedges along with the exterior of the building were trimmed to perfection. It looked like the front of a home and garden magazine. The second thing he noticed was that the shutters of every one of the house's many windows were tightly shut and latched despite the currently mild weather. For some reason, Barrow's mind went back to Carla's body back in the morgue, to that face that was so pretty with those closed eyes that were never going to open again. McCann met him at the door. Mike was immediately caught off guard by the presence of the man.
Welcome, Detective Barrow. Please, come in. Allow me to show you the scene of the crime.
Yeah.
As McCann led him through the house, the detective looked around the house in awe. The perfectly cultivated exterior was nothing compared to the inside. Paintings and statues were everywhere, making the place look almost like an art museum. The central piece of the collection was a large sculpture with radiating arms that he assumed was supposed to be the sun. As he followed the man up the spiral staircase, a strange smell caught his attention. Part of it reminded him of the smell that came right after it rained, and beneath that, very subtly, was the scent of blood.
Here it is, Detective,
said McCann as they reached the top of the staircase. Barrow stopped in his tracks as he saw the hallway ahead of him. It was a disaster zone. Light streamed in through a hole in the ceiling onto massive broken drywall and shingles. Water was still dripping from the opening into the floor where a massive puddle had formed, already ruining the expensive rug and hardwood floors beneath it.
What God's name happened here?
Well, I had just decided to get ready for bed and was passing through the hallway when I heard a strange sound behind me.
Said McCann, his voice unnervingly steady given the situation.
I turned around and I saw a creature.
A creature? Not a person?
Most definitely a creature, Detective. It appeared vaguely like a woman, but she was a very dark blue and surrounded by mist. Before I could act, the creature screamed at me.
Like a banshee?
Yes, exactly. It was, deafening.
For the first time since he had arrived, the detective heard the old man's voice waver. That was almost as bad as the story. He doubted this man had ever shown weakness in his life.
And then, as soon as the noise stopped, great wings came out of her back and she flew up through the ceiling. I was almost struck by the debris.
Wait. It smashed its way out, but not in?
No, Detective, she did not. I know you must think I'm insane. I would myself if not for this pile of wreckage on the floor here.
I would any other week, Mr. McCann. But not today. Not this week.
I hesitate to ask. But is there anything you can do to help me?
The man paused before continuing. Mike looked over the ruined hallway for a moment, a cold certainty forming in the pit of his stomach, and then turned back towards the staircase. Looking over the gallery below, he saw the sculpture of the sun, a large orb with rays reaching out to smaller orbs, all the pieces connecting to the whole. Barrow reflected for a moment on a thought that had been growing in his head for the past 2 days. Finally, he decided it was the only thing that made sense, no matter how out there it may seem.
I have an idea, Mr. McCann. I have to go talk to someone. In the meantime, I'll have a patrol car come by tonight to keep watch. Do you have any interior rooms that you could hole up in if something happens? Preferably with a phone you can call 911 on.
I have a reasonably furnished basement.
I'd stay in there tonight if I was you, sir. I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
The detective began to go down the staircase when the man touched him lightly on the shoulder. It was an unnerving touch, although he couldn't have said why. He turned to see McCann staring into the space